Hello everyone, welcome to episode 5. It's very windy. I hope I can remove the wind sounds from my video. We'll see. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about one of my favorite book series that I've come to read, and it's known as the Millennium Trilogy. In 2004, a Swedish journalist delivered 3 manuscripts to a publisher. They were very long, very dense, political, and angry. The journalist had written them at night after his work. Those nights were fueled by coffee, cigarettes, and a lifetime of documenting and researching right-wing extremism and violence. There's literally a sandstorm in front of me. Now, unfortunately, he would not live long enough to see them printed, to see them being published, and to see the global phenomenon that they would become. The journalist was Stieg Larsson, and the books would become the internationally best-selling Millennium series, starting with The Girl with Dragon Tattoo. Now, you need to understand that when talking about Stieg Larsson, we're not talking about just a thriller writer. We're talking about a person who has spent his life fighting for the causes that he deeply believed in, especially for the cause he would refer to as men who hate women. Now, I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm gonna go back. Stieg Larsson did not actually start as a literary figure. In the 1970s and 1980s, Larsson worked as a graphic designer for a Swedish news agency known as TT. I'm gonna insert the actual name because I don't know how to pronounce it right, so I'm not even gonna try to. So at the time, though he was working as a graphic designer, he was very politically engaged. Even before he was a formal investigative journalist, he was researching extremist groups on his own time. He collected documents, pamphlets, publications by far-right groups, and slowly building an archive. Now, I'm going to give you the definitions of these very political terms because I wouldn't be able to explain them on my own. I'm not very good with politics. So when we talk about far-right extremism, it refers to the political ideologies or movements that typically reject democratic norms. Common characteristics include extreme nationalism, belief that one nation, culture, or ethnic group should dominate, often hostile towards immigration or multiculturalism, or authoritarian rule instead of democratic institutions. Some groups promote racial, ethnic, or religious hierarchy. Conspiracy thinking. There's also beliefs about secret plots controlling society, for example, conspiracies about elites, immigrants, or minorities. Far-right extremism can include different movements such as ultra-nationalist groups, white supremacist organizations, fascists or neo-fascist movements. Now, when we talk about left-wing activism, it refers to political or social action aimed at promoting ideas traditionally associated with the political left, such as equality, social justice, and expanded protections for workers or marginalized groups. Activism means people actively campaigning, organizing, protesting, or advocating for political or social change. Now, when it comes to core ideas behind left-wing activism, we talk about economic equality, social justice, government role in society, and environmental protection. So during the 1980s and 1990s, Sweden, which was internationally seen as progressive and peaceful, was actually experiencing the growth of supremacism or far-right extremism. Now, Stieg Larsson at the time was disturbed by white supremacist organizations and extremist political movements. His primary focus was tracking and documenting their publications, finances, and connections across Europe. Larsson strongly opposed racism and discrimination against immigrants. During the 1980s and 2000s, Sweden experienced growing immigration, as well as increased activity from racist groups. So he documented those developments and he warned about the normalization of extremist ideas in mainstream politics. Another major issue in Larsson's work was gender-based violence. Through his characters, he highlighted issues such as domestic violence, sexual assault, abuse of women within institutions, and misogyny in societies. Larsson argued that violence against women was a structural societal problem rather than just isolated crimes. Larsson also criticized powerful institutions when they abused authority. In other words, government corruption, secret intelligence operations, police misconduct, and corporate crimes and cover-ups. These issues, they appear strongly in the Millennium novels, specifically through the investigative journalism plots. Larsson strongly believed that journalism was essential to protect democracy. His work emphasized protecting the freedom of press. So unlike many journalists who saw these issues as just fringe stories, Larsson treated them as systematic threats, and he also believed that ignoring extremism will only allow it to grow. So he spent most of his career as an investigative journalist and political activist before becoming famous as a novelist. In 1995, Stieg Larsson co-founded Expo, which was an anti-fascist magazine dedicated to investigating right-wing extremist groups, tracking racist propaganda, and documenting organized hate movements. Although Expo primarily focused on right-wing extremism, Larsson increasingly saw the connection between fascism, patriarchy, violence against women, and the abuse of institutional power. Even after his death, Expo continued its work, and Larsson became a symbol of anti-fascist resistance journalism. Through his work in fiction, through his novels, he was able to bring these issues to a larger audience, a global audience. Ironically, he was able to reach way more people through his fictional work, through his novels, rather than his work as a journalist. Stieg Larsson was still working at Expo when he began working on his Millennium Trilogy. Now, I'm going to talk about his work ethic because it's something that interests me a lot when it comes to the work of writers or artists in general. Larsson was known to work very long hours, 12 to 16 hours every day. His routine often looked like this. During the daytime, he would work as an investigative journalist and editing at Expo. During the evenings and at night, after work, he would write fiction and he would do a lot of research for his Millennium series. Colleagues said that he would often stay in the office way late into the night. He was known for drinking a lot of coffee, excessive coffee drinking, chain smoking, sleeping very little, and working long hours. Larsson treated writing as a daily discipline. He didn't treat writing as just sitting around and waiting for inspiration. His typical habits included, like I said before, writing late at night after work, but also drafting quickly and continuously. Larsson focused on completing large amounts of text, and it is this consistency that helped him finish all 3 manuscripts before any of them were published. He also wrote at an unusually fast pace. So by the time of his death in 2004, he had completed all 3 novels of the trilogy, and he had also outlined and planned out the upcoming novels. Many colleagues believed that he would have produced a very large body of work had he lived longer. I think he would have been a very prolific writer like Stephen King. Larsson also had a reputation for being a very meticulous researcher, and that of course came from his career as an investigative journalist. For both fiction and his journalistic work, he gathered tons of documents and archives. He studied legal systems and corporate structure, and he tracked extremist organizations across Europe. This research-heavy approach is actually very palpable in his Millennium novels, which is why they feel very detailed and realistic. You would think it's based on real events, real stories. Larsson was not only driven by storytelling, he felt that he had a political and moral mission. And interestingly, Larsson reportedly viewed his fiction work as a break from his journalistic work, while investigating extremist groups' activities was exhausting and at times very dangerous. Writing novels allowed him to explore similar themes only creatively. He also had the chance to imagine justice being served, and he had the freedom to build characters who were able to fight back abusive systems. Okay, now I'm gonna briefly talk about the Millennium Trilogy, starting with The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the first book. Once you understand the world that Stieg Larsson has created, you will be able to understand Stieg Larsson himself. Those novels fall under the crime and thriller genre and Nordic noir. The setting is Sweden. The tone is cold, slow burn, investigative, and journalistic realism. Now to go back, I'm gonna just define Nordic noir to you as a genre. So Nordic noir is a genre of crime fiction that originated in the Nordic countries. It combines crime stories with social criticism, usually set in bleak, atmospheric Scandinavian environments. The genre actually became globally famous in the 2000s through writers like Stieg Larsson and his Millennium series. Now, the novel begins with an investigative journalist. His name is Mikael Blomkvist, and he is the co-founder of Millennium magazine. You see, there are parallels between Mikael Blomkvist's character and Stieg Larsson himself. And the story opens with him having lost a very big case against a very powerful industrialist. His name is Hans-Erik Wennerström. Blomkvist's reputation is damaged, he faces prison time, and his credibility as an investigative journalist is shaken. At this very vulnerable moment of his life and career, he receives a very strange offer. Henrik Wenger is an aging billionaire. He hires Mikael Blomkvist to investigate a 40-year-old disappearance that happened within his family. His niece, Harriet Wenger, vanished in 1966 from a remote island that is owned by the family itself, the Wenger family. Her body was not found. The island was sealed off that day, the day of the disappearance. And Henrik Wenger, the grandfather, believes that someone in the family must know something from that day. So officially, Mikael Blomkvist is hired to write the family memoir, the Wenger family memoir, but secretly he would be working on investigating this disappearance. Meanwhile, we are introduced to the novel's main character, who has also become an icon in literature, and that is Lisbeth Salander. I will talk about Salander later. I'll be talking in more detail about her personality traits and other stuff. For now, I will tell you that she is a brilliant hacker. She is socially withdrawn. She is a ward of the state, and I will define to you what ward of the state means. So, ward of the state is a person, usually a minor, aka a child under 18, for whom the government has taken legal responsibility for care and protection because their parents or guardians cannot or will not properly care for them. This was Lisbeth Salander. She was a ward of the state, and she is also legally labeled as incompetent. So publicly she is thought of as this incompetent ward of the state, but secretly she is a genius hacker who works as a private investigator conducting background research or background checks on people. Her life takes a new dark turn when her new legal guardian, his name is Niels Bjurman, abuses his authority as his legal guardian and sexually assaults her. One of the most iconic and memorable moments in the novel is when Lisbeth retaliates brutally, documenting her guardian's abuse of her and blackmailing him in a very genius way to regain somewhat control of her life. This is where the novel establishes its central theme, which is the systemic violence against women and institutional failure. Now, to go back to Mikael Blomkvist, remember he was given this task by the billionaire, Henrik Wennerström. Blomkvist accepts the job, he moves to the Wenger estate, and he begins digging into decades of the family history. He discovers wild things. He discovers financial corruption, Nazi affiliation in the family past, tensions and very dark rivalries within some of the family members, and a series of very mysterious biblical references connected to many missing women. So what started as an investigation to understand the niece Harriet's disappearance expands into a case of serial killings targeting women across Sweden. Now, at some point, Mikael Blomkvist demands a very capable research assistant, and this is where he teams up with none other than Lisbeth Salander. Their dynamic is crucial. He is methodical, journalistic, and patient. She is technologically brilliant, instinctive, and fearless. And when I say fearless, I mean fearless. So together they decode old photographs, financial records, and many more hidden clues. Now I think I'm going to stop here because I don't want to spoil the story, because the ending is brilliant. The discoveries they make are insane, to say the least. I'll just tell you that it's a very good and in many ways satisfying ending. But I would also describe the ending as quiet. The novel closes with triumph, but there's emotional restraint. I will also not tell you what I mean by that, but I will tell you that it has to do with people feeling things for each other, relationship things. I'll just stop here. So the core themes of this novel are violence against women, obviously. The murders that are mentioned in the stories are not random. They are ideological. Another very important theme is corruption behind respectability, or a respectable facade. You will discover how, let's say, the Wenger family, the very rich Wenger family, represents institutional rot that is hiding behind a lot of luxury and prestige. A third important theme is journalism versus power. The battles that Blomkvist goes through as an investigative journalist, especially with his fight against the big industrialist Wenström, they mirror the author's investigative work. A fourth very important theme is control versus autonomy. Lisbeth Salander's journey, or her arc, is reclaiming power over a system that declares that she is incapable, that labels her as incapable. Now, why are these novels more than just thrillers? Structurally speaking, it's a very classic cold case mystery, but thematically speaking, it's political fiction disguised as crime. Now, I told you before that I was gonna talk a little bit more about Lisbeth Salander, and the reason is she is a very iconic fictional character. She's actually one of the most distinctive characters in modern crime fiction. And rightfully so, because, when you combine a brilliant hacker, a social outsider, a trauma survivor, and a moral avenger, you get a very powerful, very memorable character. I'm going to talk a little bit about her core personality traits. Lisbeth Salander actually possesses near-genius intelligence, particularly in pattern recognition, memory, and computer systems. By the way, speaking of memory, she also has a very powerful photographic memory, which she uses a lot during their investigations. She can literally leaf through a book and have every page imprinted in her brain. She is a world-class hacker, and she operates under an alias, which is Wasp. And in the novel, they also mention that one of her tattoos is actually a wasp tattoo that she has on her neck. And you will also understand how she got the name, but that is, details in the novel itself. Throughout the story, we see how her intelligence allows her to uncover truths behind institutions, wealth, and bureaucracy. The thing is, and most importantly, she does not trust or rely on authority. So she relies on her own systems of logic and justice rather than the society's. One of the most beautiful and inspiring things about Lisbeth Salander is her extreme independence as well, and from a very young age. She refuses dependence on others in any shape or form. She lives alone. She keeps very minimal social relationships. She avoids emotional vulnerability. You never see her vulnerable despite everything. She rejects societal expectations, and expectations when it comes to career or behavior, and especially looks. Now, this independence is partly defiance, and it's partly self-protection. After years and years of abuse from her guardians or from the institutions, Salander is also interpreted as having traits consistent with the autism spectrum characteristics. Though it was never formally labeled in the novels, she has a lot of difficulties with social cues, for example. She has very literal thinking and very blunt communication. You feel her emotional detachment in conversations. However, she's not emotionally empty. Some people think she's very dry, she's very harsh, she has no emotions, but she actually does, and she feels a lot. But the thing is, she expresses herself very differently than other people. Now, another very important thing to understand is that although Salander appears very antisocial, she has a very rigid moral compass. Her ethical framework is very simple, but very uncompromising. She believes that abusers deserve to be punished, victims deserve protection, and most importantly, corrupt systems need exposure. This leads to her acts of vigilante justice, which are often very brutal. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about her appearance, because she also has a very distinctive style, and it's described very clearly in the books. Salander deliberately cultivates this very punk look. She is known for her very small, very slight build. She has short black hair and numerous piercings. She has a lot of tattoos, and the most famous one is the dragon tattoo that she has across her back. She wears very dark and unconventional clothing. This appearance serves multiple purposes. She expresses self-ownership of her body. Again, as I said before, rejection of the social expectations. And in many ways, it's also a psychological armor, and it's something that they explain in the novel as well. She weaponizes the society's tendency to underestimate her. So when people see a fragile little misfit, they overlook a strategic genius. And since she's not very much into people and she has a lot of trust issues, it's also a way for her to, seem a bit repulsive to people so that they would stay away from her. In the novel, her partnership with Mikael Blomkvist is what drives the narrative. I love their relationship so much. And I'm not saying anything, I'm not saying it's romantic or not. I'm not saying it's a friendship. I'm not saying anything. Their interactions, the way they work together, the way they click is one of my favorite, fictional character duos of all time. And what makes me emotional is how much she loves him and how much she trusts him. Again, because she was betrayed by a lot of people and she hates most of the people who exist in her life. But with Mikael Blomkvist, it's so different. She trusts him. She cares for him. Anyway, I'm not going to expand on that because it's beautiful to discover while reading the book or while watching the movie, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. The relationship is very complex. This is why I cannot say much about it. They have this professional collaboration, but they also have a sexual relationship. They have very deeply unspoken feelings. There's a lot of emotional asymmetry between them because Lisbeth Salander is very emotionally guarded. She doesn't open up easily. She doesn't express herself easily. She's a closed book, you could say. Now, another reason why this character works so well is because within her personality, there's a lot of contradictions. There's a lot of dichotomy. She is both very vulnerable, yet very dangerous. She's emotionally very distant, very muted, yet extremely loyal. She's socially powerless, yet intellectually dominant. She's a victim and an avenger. Now, these contrasting aspects of her personality, they make her feel very real, as opposed to having this perfect hero type. No, she's not heroic in a conventional sense. She's a very inspiring character. She's someone who gets knocked down 1,000,000 times and gets up 1,000,000 times more. She's incredibly interesting, the way she carries herself, the way she lives, what she does, and even in the way she expresses herself to the people that she loves. I love how low-key it is. Like she can take care of someone she loves. She will do anything for them. She will kill someone for them and will never show off like I did this for you or this is how much I care for you. Everything she does very quietly. So in essence, Lisbeth Salander is important not just as a character in a crime story, but she's also a symbol of resistance and survival. She became one of the most iconic fictional characters of the 21st century. She influenced modern crime fiction, feminist anti-heroes, and the damaged genius archetype. Now, the novels were adapted into films, by the way, and this helped a lot with, spreading the popularity of the character even more and more. The first adaptation was done in Sweden, and supposedly they're very successful. I'm ashamed to say that I haven't watched them yet. And I will tell you why. Because I watched the 2011 version that David Fincher did, because I am a huge David Fincher fan, and I fell in love with this version. So whenever I watch an adaptation of a movie and they do another one, it's very hard for me to watch another one because it's just that the characters are set in my mind now, the mood and everything. But they say that the original ones, the Swedish versions, are the iconic ones, the successful ones. And people really love the actress who played Lisbeth Salander, the Swedish actress. Her name is Noomi Rapace. I think I've only watched her in one movie, which she had a small role in one of the Sherlock Holmes films. People really love her as Lisbeth Salander, and a lot of people are reluctant to watch other versions because they say that Noomi Rapace is the only girl with a dragon tattoo. But I disagree. I haven't watched the original film adaptations, but let me tell you about the 2011 David Fincher adaptation. Because I personally fell in love with Rooney Mara's version of Lisbeth Salander. I love this movie so much that I decided to tell you a little bit about the journey that Rooney Mara had to go through to get her role. If you read the books, you will understand how difficult and complex this character is. So that's one thing. But when you tell me that you bring a girl to play her who looks nothing like her and dresses nothing like her and acts nothing like her to play her part, that is another level of iconic. This is how it all started for her. So her mom's friend had read the books and she told Rooney's mom that Rooney needs to audition for this role. She needs to play this girl. And so the mom, who also read the book, agreed. And usually Rooney, whenever her mom suggests something, like a role to audition for, and especially when it's based on a book originally, when it's based on a novel, she believes in her mom a lot. Like whatever her mom suggests, Rooney feels strongly for. But Rooney hadn't read the books. She didn't know anything about them. She didn't know anything about Lisbeth Salander's character. So she kept tracking the auditions that were happening for the girl with the dragon tattoo to see if she could get the chance to audition. But once she discovered that David Fincher was going to direct the movie, she was determined. She started regularly inquiring about the project. Fun fact, they had worked together but very briefly because previous to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, David Fincher had directed The Social Network and Rooney had a very small part. If you watch the movie, there's a breakup scene at the pub where she breaks up with Jesse Eisenberg's character. But that was it. It was just one scene. And Rooney didn't even like the character she was playing, the character that they refer to as Susie High School. Thousands and thousands of women sent out tapes trying to audition for the girl with the dragon tattoo, Lisbeth Salander role. The costume designer said that they had moms auditioning for the role. They had librarians from Ohio, people from all over the world. Rooney wanted to watch the Swedish version with Noomi Rapace, and she was watching the movies with her friend, and her friend looked at her and said, "Tell me again which part you want to play. You want to play Harriet Wenger? It's a tiny role. Why would you want to do that?" And Rooney got really pissed because the fact that no one expected her to audition for Lisbeth Salander's role. No one saw her as being capable of doing it. And that made her even more determined to audition because she wanted to prove everyone in her life wrong. Even David Fincher himself, the director, did not believe that she had it in her. He gave her a chance, but he didn't expect her to be capable of it at the beginning. As part of the audition, they had people come in and read a poem of their choice in a Swedish accent. So Rooney prepared a poem, but David Fincher had responded very well to Rooney's audition tape. So in her case, she didn't read the poem that she had prepared, but they gave her a part of the script to read. Now, it's so cute how she said that even at the time where she was auditioning for her role, she didn't want to read the novels because she knew that if she didn't get the role, she would be very devastated and she would not be able to get over it. So she didn't want to get overexcited by, digging deeper into the project and getting attached to the story and the character even more. So she was reluctant to read the books at that point. Then they had more screen tests and they gave them 3 scenes from the movie that they had to act on tape. And one of the scenes was actually a very intense scene. It's probably the most intense scene in the script itself, which was I don't know if I can say it post this on YouTube, but a scene. Rooney was ready. She was ready to do anything to get this role. So after multiple screen tests and auditions and all that, the studios were very much against Rooney, which was very frustrating to David Fincher because at that point, he wanted her. He saw it in her, but he had to go through all the process just because he was forced to by the studios. But he was determined to push Rooney to the front of the line. They probably screen tested 4 to 5 or 6 times, and she was so done by that point. She was very frustrated because she was thinking, you either want me or not. I can't keep doing this. I need to move on with my life. The costume designer of the film also had this idea of when they had like a limited number of girls that they had in mind at that point, she gave all of them different clothing items and they went to separate rooms. She asked them to pick different clothing items and put them together as a look to think of what Lisbeth Salander would wear. Every time they would come back for more screen tests, Rooney was the only one who would pick the same items that she picked the first time. The other girls would, tweak some stuff and think that, maybe if I choose this or maybe if I do that, maybe that would be the right choice. But Rooney would pick the exact same look every time. It was very ingrained in her what Lisbeth Salander was, and she wanted to show that she understood the character and she was very sure of every choice she was making. So that stood out to the costume designer as well. Now, one day, and after 2 months of screen tests and auditioning and all that, she had to go to New York because she had a photo shoot to do with Elle magazine. Actually, to promote The Social Network, which she also did with David Fincher. She was about to go to New York, but then they told her, no, you have to come back today, it's urgent. Don't go to the photo shoot, do anything. Tell them you have food poisoning. And Rooney was so frustrated at this point. Like, she was sacrificing a lot of other stuff just for the sake of auditioning for something that she might not get. But then she ended up canceling. She went to see them. It was not for screen tests. She actually sat in an office with David Fincher. He took out his iPad and he showed her a press release. The press release was announcing her as the girl who would play the girl with the dragon tattoo. He started giving her this long speech. He told her that, I hope you understand that if you accept to play this role, that it might harm your career in, other places. For example, he told her that Vivian Leigh was so good in the movie Streetcar Named Desire, but she will always be known as Scarlett O'Hara. So in other words, he was telling her that if you accept to take on this role, you have to know what comes with it. But Rooney was determined. She told him, I had 2 full months to think about everything. I am taking this role. And so she got the gig. And as soon as she got her role, they chopped her hair, which was very long. It was down to her back. And they bleached her eyebrows. David Fincher asked her to stay out of the sunlight. She had to, seem very pale, because it was set in Sweden. And he told her to stop eating because she had to look very skinny and frail. And a couple of hours later, she was learning how to disassemble and reassemble a computer, to skateboard, and to, ride a motorcycle. By the way, when she went through this very intense physical transformation, and just the very first steps of it, which was to blacken her hair and to cut it and to bleach her eyebrows, she asked for a couple of minutes alone in her room. So she looked at the mirror and she panicked. She panicked, but she only gave herself 5 minutes. She said, that's it, 5 minutes, and I have to be up on my feet and it's time to get to work. Because it was very overwhelming. I'm going to show you photos of before and after. You would not believe how different she looks. And then they took her to the costume designer. Her friend, he owned a tattoo and piercing parlor. Some of the piercings she decided herself that she wanted to actually get. Because if she lives with some of her piercings as, being real piercings, it helps her get into the mood of, the character more. So she decided that she would actually pierce her eyebrow. Some of the piercings were fake, which is this one and the lip one. But, and very interestingly, she said that she decided to actually pierce her nipple because I love the way she explained it. She said that there's a lot of nudity in the movie. So when she doesn't have her clothes on, this piercing, oddly enough, it made her feel like she was not in her own body. It made nudity easier for her. And of course, besides the physical stuff that were the physical changes that she had to go through, there were a lot of things that she had to work on. For example, Fincher wanted her to not be a feminine character. He wanted her to look like a 14-year-old boy. This is why he told her to take skateboarding lessons, because it would change the way she carried herself, the way she walked, and, the way she stands. Because, Rooney is a very feminine girl. So she had to change that in a very short period of time. After that, David Fincher also told her that she would have to isolate herself in many ways. She would have to say goodbye to family and friends for a while, and she will have to immediately move to Sweden, to Stockholm. He was actually worried about her when he asked for that. But Rooney said, are you kidding me? This is like a vacation for me because I'm already an introvert, so I need a break from everything and everyone. So she was very happy to do that. She moved to Stockholm. She started walking around the streets. And of course, she started reading the novels as well. And she fell in love with the story. She fell in love with the character even more. And she loved also visiting the actual places that are mentioned in the story, which is very interesting. Actually, a lot of tourists do that. A lot of tourists are known to go to Sweden and of course, like fans of the novels, they go and they visit the actual places that are mentioned in the book. For example, where the Millennium magazine, office is, where Lisbeth Salander was born. Actually, it's also my dream to visit these places. Maybe one day, I hope so. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say about the movie adaptations. Don't forget, there's the Swedish version. First one was, I think, released in 2009. And there's the David Fincher one, which I've watched, which I recommend you watch. And it was released in 2011. Listen, I am a huge David Fincher fan. If I were to recommend some of the movies that I've watched, of course, I would recommend the movie Seven. I think released in 1995. Panic Room. I love his movie Panic Room. Gone Girl. The Zodiac, Social Network, of course, and of course The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Now the sad thing is they were supposed to make 3 films for the 3 books, but the project stopped. It was because of financial issues from Sony Studio. They couldn't fund the project anymore. It was a really good movie, in my opinion. I remember, first of all, I have to say this: I am so grateful for my sister. My eldest sister, because she was the one who introduced me to the books in the first place. I literally remember her devouring the books, and I remember hoping I would get to the day where I would feel motivated enough to, go through these very thick novels. I was not ready at the time. I was too busy for them. But my sister has always inspired me to read them, and she's always been in love with the character of Lisbeth Salander. And I remember when she discovered that they were going to release a David Fincher adaptation of the book, and we watched the official teaser trailer for it. It's still one of the most beautiful trailers I've ever watched. Not the actual trailer, but the teaser one, the red band one. And it's a trailer that does not reveal anything. There's no conversation, there's no nothing. It's just a teaser with flashing images and beautiful music, which is the music that they used for the intro as well of the film. It was a cover of the Immigrant Song that Karen O did. It was beautiful. It was such a powerful and impactful opening to a movie. What else did I want to say? The actors are all amazing. Like, besides Rooney, you have Daniel Craig, who plays Mikael Blomkvist. You have Christopher Plummer, Stellan Skarsgård, and Goran something. His last name, I can't pronounce his last name. I don't know how to pronounce it, but the mood, the feel, the suspense. I mean, if there's anyone who can excel at suspense, crime, thriller movies, it would be David Fincher. The movie is very good. I recommend it, and I cannot recommend the books enough. If you are into crime, thriller, investigative journalism, all these themes in a book, those are classics. So you need to get into the Millennium Trilogy. By the way, when I told you about the story, I only talked about the first book, which was The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. As for the other 2, I'm not going to go into detail about them at all, because it will be too difficult. I will just give you very, very brief summaries about the next 2 books. So the second one is entitled The Girl Who Played with Fire. Salander becomes the prime suspect in a triple murder linked to an investigation into sex trafficking. While in hiding, she secretly investigates the crime herself and uncovers a shadowy criminal network tied to her own abusive past, leading to the revelation of a powerful figure known as Zala. That's it. Now, the third book, The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, after surviving an attempt on her life, Salander becomes the center of a national political scandal when Blomkvist and his allies expose a secret faction within Swedish intelligence that protected her criminal father and illegally imprisoned her as a child. The story culminates in a courtroom battle that clears her name and dismantles the conspiracy. The third book was so exciting to read because there's a lot of details about her past, and there's a lot of details into the investigation and the trial that they do in the end. I'm not going to give you any more details. Now I'm going to tell you something that personally breaks my heart. They say that Stieg Larsson did not finish the Millennium novels. They say that he had more manuscripts that he was working on, but they will never see the light of day. And his brother revealed that after having read the other manuscripts that exist, He said that he probably worked on book number 5 before working on book number 4 because, according to Stieg Larsson, book number 5 was more fun to write. So there was more to come when it comes to Lisbeth Salander and, Stieg Larsson's world, but we will never receive them, unfortunately. It seriously breaks my heart. It's a frustration that you can never do anything about. So I also tell you that Stieg Larsson lived a very modest life with a woman that he met when he was only 18. Her name is Eva Gabrielsson, and after his death, she cut all ties with his family because apparently he did not write his will before his death, and his family inherited everything. But Eva Gabrielsson said that his family does not know anything about what Stieg Larsson actually wanted to do with his legacy. His family proposed to work with Eva Gabrielsson to see what they would do with everything they inherited from him, but she refused. He also refuses to talk to anyone, to the press or anything. They say that Stieg Larsson died from a heart attack, but there's also a bit of mystery around that. Some say he was poisoned and some say he was murdered. It's a mystery. There's a very interesting quote that I read, and it said that Stieg Larsson wrote about systems that silence people. Ironically, death silenced him before he could witness his own revolution in crime fiction. And finally, I will tell you that the book sold more than 100 million copies worldwide. They were translated into 44 languages, and at some point, one of the books in the trilogy became the best-selling ebook of all time. Writing those novels was not easy at all because Stieg Larsson was continuously receiving death threats. He always lived under security precautions. He avoided publishing or revealing his home address. He worked for very long hours and under tremendous amounts of pressure. And he reportedly never married his longtime partner because the Swedish law at that time would have made her personal information public, and he did not want to expose her to danger. So Stieg Larsson, in a way, lived in constant fear of violence and retaliation. And that sense of threat, it bleeds into his fiction. We have one last thing to do, my friends, and that is to read you one of my favorite quotes. Let's see if I wrote a quote from the Millennium Trilogy in my notebook, actually. What is wrong with me? Look at this. I write like this sometimes, and I write like this sometimes, and I write like this sometimes. Literally, if I open this book, you see me do this. I found one. And I remember this one made me emotional because to people who find it very hard to express themselves or to open up, if they were to read this, they would relate a lot. And I feel like this is why I wrote it down. It made me feel something at the time. So I wrote, "It did no good to cry. She had learned that early on. She had also learned that every time she tried to make someone aware of something in her life, the situation just got worse. Constantly, it was up to her to solve her problems by herself, using whatever methods she deemed necessary." And that's it. Thank you for watching this episode, and I will see you next time, very soon, hopefully. I actually have an idea for next time, something fun, something artsy. I will tell you about it later. So until then, take care and see you!